Hey, all you witches, heathens, pagans, and magical souls. Thank you for being a listener of Back on the Broomstick. If you'd like to support this two-woman show in another way, check out the link in our show notes where you can become a one-time or monthly benefactor of Back on the Broomstick.
So if y'all could take a second and throw us a little love that way, help us towards our behind-the-scenes costs, check out the link. We appreciate it.
A huge shout out to all of our current benefactors. Thank you so much. Keep it witchy.
It's witchcraft.
Hi, and welcome to the Solarium, Chelle and Layla's herb-filled, sun-drenched sanctuary, where they kick off their pointy-toed shoes, put up their base homes, and sit back, relax with some books, or maybe some authors. I'm Layla.
And I'm Chelle.
In this episode, we're talking all things divination with Paulina Stevens and Jezmina Von Thiele, authors of the book Secrets of Romani Fortune-Telling, divining with tarot, palmistry, tea leaves, and more. Jezmina is a fortune teller, a writer, an editor, a teacher, and a performer on the East Coast. And Paulina owns Romani Holistic Healing, where she offers fortune telling, herbal remedies, life coaching, and meditation services. She hails from the West Coast.
Sounds familiar,
right? They're also co-hosts of the podcast Romanistan. We'd like to welcome to Back on the Broomstick, Paulina and Jezmina. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so happy to be here.
We are very excited to have you guys here because we were fortunate enough to get an advanced copy of your book and we fell in love. That's all we have to say. We just absolutely love it.
And I want to start off by saying this isn't necessarily, like, I understand the concept, the secrets of the Romani fortune-telling, but this book is like universal for anybody who's looking for tips and tricks and advice on divination in any form. Like this is all of a sudden one of my top divination books because this is so fabulous. I love this. But we'll get into the whys and
thank you.
details, but
yeah, I'm loving that right now. Thank you so much.
Oh, you guys are very welcome. I did find out that the podcast is kind of how you guys met. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. We're on year 3. It's crazy.
Congratulations.
Tell us a little bit about how your guys' relationship has evolved and a little bit about what you talk about on your podcast.
Yeah, well, I love when Paulina tells the story of how we met because it really started with her.
So I was hoping to get something started, either a podcast or a YouTube channel or something. I wanted to just kind of spread the information because at the time I had left my community and there were other girls that were kind of reaching out that were like, hey, like, I went through the same thing and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, I don't know, like what to do. And I came across a video, I think it was a YouTube video where Jez was talking about just Romani rights and just advocating for us as a people. And I felt like it was kind of this different point of view. So I had originally emailed them and we just, you want to take it from there?
Yeah. And Paulina, I feel like you're leaving out some of the really crucial part of your story.
I would love to hear a little bit of the backstory about that, Paulina. Tell our listeners a little bit about your history because it's fascinating what brought you here.
Yeah, so I grew up in Romani community and we're kind of our specific subgroup of Roma people that came here. My family is a little bit split. Like, so we have a couple of different vitsas, which are like subgroups that have kind of joined together. So we had come to America around the late 1800s, kind of also then during World War II as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we kept a lot of our traditions like pretty close-knit. So I wasn't allowed to go to school, or when I did, it was just not for long, or it wasn't really important, or because the law required us to, or just something like that. And the reason why, the book also explains like the details and the deep kind of rooted things that, created the distrust between us and like the government, basically.
Sure.
So yeah, our community stayed pretty close-knit, and I was raised to be a fortune teller. So I wasn't allowed to really have another job at all. Like I had to be a fortune teller, selling crystals, candles, this, like stores and stuff like that. It's just something you can do wherever you go. You can do it. You could read for people on the street, you can read for people on a fair, you can just kind of do it wherever you are. And so, yeah, that's what we were raised to do. And then when I say left the community, it's just kind of my specific community. You obviously can't stop being, your
Who you
You are
are.
who you
ethnicity or
are.
your race. Like you can't really stop that part. But yeah, so it's kind of I left my specific community, and we are trying to, I guess, create a little more inclusive space for people inside and outside the community. And I feel like Jess really also brought a different, much needed perspective to the podcast and just to our work in general.
And that's really what you were doing when you were reaching out to Jezmina. You reached out to them more to help create this whole community and to help create a new community from the one that you had left.
Definitely. And yeah, one of the best phone calls I've ever made or emails I've ever sent, however it went down.
Jess, what's your story?
So yeah, when Paulina reached out to me, she had left her arranged marriage just maybe like a year or two before. She was asked to do a podcast with the LA Times, a series called Foretold that I highly recommend everyone listen to, just about that whole experience. And we also talk about it in the book. And Paulina wanted to make sure that she was doing something that was coming from her, even though she participated so much in Foretold, it was still, another podcast telling her story. And it made her realize that she wanted to have her own platform, and but she didn't want to do it by herself. And initially, when Paulina reached out to me, I was in such a strange time in my life. So I grew up mixed and assimilated. Basically, for any listeners who might not know, Roma refers to the Indian diasporic ethnic group, also known as gypsies, which, has been used as a slur a lot in the US. It's also a misnomer because it comes from the idea that Roma come from Egypt rather than India. And it's one of those words that a lot of Romani people will reclaim and use really proudly. Some don't. I grew up using it in my family, but pretty much across the board, Roma prefer that people who are not Romani don't appropriate the word gypsy. And so that's my little aside. So I grew up mixed and assimilated, meaning that I'm not from an entirely Romani family. My dad is not Roma. Only really my maternal grandmother is Romani. But we were so close. She was one of the most important people in my life, my favorite person, really. I just adored her. And she passed down her culture and her practices to me as a small child. And she had fled Germany after the Holocaust. And it was still unlivable there for Roma and any marginalized people, Jewish people, but also just, average German citizens, like a war-torn country. It's really hard to live in.
Yeah.
So my grandmother passed down her relationship with the Romani culture, but my relationship to the Romani culture is fragmented. I grew up outside of community versus Paulina growing up inside community. And so we had this idea that we would really like to create a podcast that told Romani stories and uplifted Romani people from all different walks of life, especially Roma who maybe feel like they don't fit in for whatever reason. So LGBTQIA people, like disabled people, maybe folks who decided not to get married or left their marriages or, pursued education or maybe are doing a traditional trade and want to talk about that. And
basically, you're trying to reach out to everybody who's had your experience, Paulina's experience, and everything in between.
Yeah, Paulina called us like the outcasts of the outcasts. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. So we have our whole little rebel
where everybody can come and just be part and be who they are and still be part of community. I love that.
Totally.
Now, how did the podcast transition to the book? Because you've had the podcast, you guys are doing really well, and now you've got this fabulous book that is ready to hit the world.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so Wiser had reached out to me a few years ago, and I was very, very ill at the time. And so I was like, because I had long COVID, I still do, but I'm making improvements. And so, yeah, it's been weird. But, I was like, let me please be patient. Let me think about it. And they had originally asked for a subject that I wasn't sure I wanted to talk about because so much of it is closed practice. So I pitched to them, let's talk about Romani divination because that's something that is mainstream, And we would really like to add cultural context back to that. But I wanted to write it with Paulina because she's my creative partner. I love our two perspectives. And as the podcast has evolved, we've become such good friends, even though we didn't know each other at all. And so I just couldn't imagine doing it without her.
And I love how you wove, I understand you didn't want to get into closed practices, but I love how you wove so much history and culture and your personal histories into this book while keeping it chock full of practical things that people can do, different divination styles. You explained them in such an accessible, beautiful way while keeping true to your culture, I guess, while keeping all of that there.
Yeah, and it's so nice to have a book that can lend the cultural context of, you know, tarot is definitely created by the Italians. However, like Roma created it as a divination tool, and this is part of our survival. And it's nice because these things have become universal, but we're trying to add the cultural context back to it. So people don't do things maybe accidentally, like, you know, dressing up like the traditional fortune teller or something is actually
Right.
dressing up as a caricature of a Romani person. And so we can all like be so excited about all the ways that we connect and we have similarities while also being really respectful of histories of persecution, of cultural sacredness, of survival practices, and like honor and
Yes.
call that out and name it.
And that's such a really good point that you make very subtly throughout the whole book, that there is so much history and culture here and so much of your own personal history. But that's also what makes it so very easy to connect to, so very easy to find similarities. Like, for example, with our grandmothers and with learning palm reading. You mentioned your beloved grandmother that you learned from, Jess, and I kept seeing things from my childhood reflected in your childhoods. Like one of the things you talked about, I was talking to Chelle about this beforehand, is you have a chapter in here on palmistry where you talk about the different types of palmistry. And you both mentioned being taught different meanings for the hands. My grandmother was more of a spiritualist. She didn't do any of these things. She was not a fortune teller by any stretch, but she enjoyed them. And she taught me with palmistry that your dominant hand, that's your future, right? That's your future. And your non-dominant hand, she said, was your fate at birth. And she said your
Oh.
non-dominant hand would never change, but your dominant hand would change over your life as your, chance and choice changed things. Now, you guys each had learned different things about that. Can you tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about learning from your grandmother?
Yeah, my grandmother had such a funny way of putting this. And so the way she put it was, well, your dominant hand, and if you're ambidextrous, you know, whatever hand you tend to write with, is your life. Like that's your life now and it changes. And your non-dominant hand is your past life. And my grandmother did believe in past lives and reincarnation. In her opinion, the past life was over, it ended, you're dead. So like stop thinking about it, like get over it. And so she didn't want me to read the non-dominant hand because she was like, well, that's just ridiculous. But I kind of love that, like never look back. But yeah, and Paulina had a different perspective on it.
Yeah, Paulina, what was your experience with learning some of these traditions from family?
What's interesting is that I feel like so many people have mentioned different things. I think like originally it was like, okay, your non-dominant hand and then your dominant hand, or it's like whatever you're feeling, or you read both of them if you need more context. So that was kind of, I don't even know if I mentioned all that in the book, but that's definitely what it was like.
And I love seeing the different perspectives, and how it's so similar and yet also so different. And I think that was another thing in the book that was really good is how you talk about reading tarot cards. And oh gosh, I'm not sure which one of you it was. Somebody said that there were so many different decks of cards in your home that the deck that you ended up reading with not only was like in not so great shape, but had cards from all sorts of different decks in it.
That was me. And it's funny too, because I think Jez mentioned that they really like that story too.
I love that. Like, do you ever do that on purpose? Like, I purposely have some decks that I have mixed different cards into. Is that anything you ever do on purpose now?
I've never done that on purpose. I don't know. It happens even now. It happens so often, like so many random cards. Like I'll see random cards on the floor and I'm like, how in the world did this even get here? How did this happen? Like everything is just mixed up everywhere because it's so intertwined with my life. So never on purpose, always by mistake, but is it really by the universe's,
Exactly. Exactly.
Didn't you have an experience once, Paulina, where you pulled out like 4 tower cards?
Yes, and I
Whew,
still
that's
think
frightening.
about it and I still get nervous sometimes. And I'm like the tarot card, like remember, like I have PTSD.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that would scare me. Like one is bad enough. Four of them? No, I'd hide under my bed. I'd be like stuffing crystals into my bra and everywhere and
So
hiding.
much
Yeah.
change. So
So,
much change ahead.
and change is scary, man.
Towards the latter half of the book, there was a bunch of tips that really grabbed me. And I like you guys' perspective and what you had to say about these topics. And the first one, I just want to get a couple opinions from you both on the ethics of fortune telling. I can't remember whose grandma gave the list of the moral and ethical code, so to say, but I
Oh,
loved
that
it.
was my grandma. Yeah.
I
That's
loved it.
good. That's so good.
And I think, again, another piece that is valid information for anybody practicing divination, no matter what your belief system is. And tell us a little bit about your rules. I'm calling them rules, but they're not rules per se. But tell us about the moral code of conduct when it comes to fortune telling and divination.
Yeah, I feel like it can be boiled down to a few basic tenets, but I expand a little more with my grandma's rules. But both Paulina and I feel really strongly like you shouldn't manipulate whoever you're reading for. You shouldn't try to scare them. My grandma had a blanket rule: don't tell anyone they're going to die, because I think that sometimes people want to be dramatic, or I don't know what it is, or feel like they can prophesize things, but it's really harmful. You can do a lot of harm reading for people without that consciousness about people's feelings and fears. But she also likewise encouraged me to really trust my intuition. I really can't doubt what I feel or hear. Sometimes the things that you might see while you're reading for people might not make any sense, and you might not say it because you're afraid to feel silly. But one of my favorite experiences was kind of recently. I was reading tea leaves for someone and they asked about their spiritual path, and they were like, just what do my guides want me to know about my spiritual path? And I saw this little possum curled up with all these little baby possums in the tea leaves, and I was like, and I heard like she's caring for possums, and I was like, that sounds crazy. But like
You're
I
like, I
know
don't want to
better.
say that.
And so I was like, are you caring for a family of possums? And she's like, yes. And so she had been taking care of these possums as a kind of devotional to the land that she was living on, because she found these possums that, didn't have a good enough shelter and they were hanging around. She's like, let me like get them a little area. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really big part of your spiritual path is caring for animals. And I've had other moments like that too, but she was really big about just saying what you believe. It's okay. Don't get your ego involved in it. Don't try to manipulate people. Don't lie. And just basically remember that you're of service and it's not about you. You're just trying to help.
And my take on that has always been this isn't a set in stone future or, a rock solid prediction, but anything from this moment on can be changed and reshaped. And that's why I never like giving, you don't tell people, yeah, you're gonna die next week, you're gonna get
Oh
hit
my
by a
God,
bus.
yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no. And I loved your listing and I thought that was great. And your next lead in, which I also, again, how to be convincing. I can't remember which one of you it was that was just kind of started at like 13, thrown in rooms of people to read. How do you be convincing at 13? How? Is this a confidence thing? Is this you got to believe in yourself for people to believe you? Is that really the basis of that?
By the time we hit 13, it's like we already know, we've been trained already our whole lives, like until we can talk. And so I feel like by 13, to me, like, yeah, like you're totally confident. You've been in the rooms and you've seen it your whole life. Now you're just the one, sitting in front of the person. And what's crazy too is I feel like we're taught how to uphold ourselves. So even when I was 13, like people thought I was older. They would like, well, you carry yourself, like so old or whatever it is. But also, even when you're clearly young, 9, 10 years old and you're at a fair, like reading for someone, whatever it is, it's such an interesting industry. Like a spiritual message can totally come from an 8-year-old or a 13-year-old. Like
Right.
it's the spirit world. It's not really like I'm not going to let an 8-year-old, do my root canal, but I wouldn't mind the tarot reading or something.
Sure. Now, didn't you also mention that you practiced a lot? They would have you maybe with an uncle or someone read palms or give them little mini readings, and I think that that's such a good point that practice really does make perfect, and reading for someone other than yourself can really help to grow your ability.
You can read all books out there, but you have to do the work, and you have to do the practice, and you have to come up with what different things mean to you in a reading and what different symbols may articulate to you specifically.
Yeah. And I'll tell you guys too, something that I didn't mention in the book was sometimes the like uncles or aunts would give an example, like a different insight. So it would be like, pretend I'm, a 19-year-old girl, or pretend I'm an 80-year-old man, or pretend I'm this, pretend I'm that. And that was also really helpful for me to feel comfortable being in a safe space of like, oh, well, I can pretend everybody's kind of messing around. And they're also giving you tips where it's like, oh, like, you're not going to be, that soft of a voice, like when you're talking with someone maybe older, or, far away, or they can't hear you, or maybe someone's really emotional. Like you have to have, then you do talk with a softer tone. Like there's just like weird little things that I feel like I didn't think about how much helped me throughout the process, but they totally did.
Now, Jezmina, your story intrigues me to no end. I actually am from and grew up in middle upstate New York, so I get that farm life that I'm not currently living. And to hear that you were put in a horse stall, like I know that fear. Like I've experienced that. I'm just thinking to myself, you used animals as a way to kind of hone your skill. Well, it sounded like maybe horses specifically to hone your skill. I never thought of that, but how amazing. So give our listeners just a little tidbit about your younger days of practicing divination with horses.
Yeah. So, because for Romani people, fortune telling is one of our many survival trades. So, because of the persecution through centuries since Roma left India, our work has been really limited. And so we take jobs like this really, really seriously, which is why, we start learning when we're like 4 years old and practicing on family. And so my family wasn't as big as Paulina's. And my dad's side of the family, yeah, for whatever reason, we just never practiced on them. And so when I had read for everyone in my family, and I had read for their friends, and I felt comfortable with everyone in New Hampshire in the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't really popular. It was a little too weird to have a fortune teller. And so, I would do that sometimes, but my grandmother and my mother were like, "You're not getting enough practice. Like we need you to, because
Step it
it's a
up,
real
right?
thing. It's a real job. You're
Right.
13 already. Like, gotta get out there." And so my mother and my auntie Zena were working at a barn, and they would teach riding and, get show horses ready for things, and sometimes show horses themselves. And there were so many problem horses that maybe they were, great horses, but they were afraid of something, or they were lame for some reason no one could figure out, or they were really grouchy, or like would like to bite people in the face. And they just had all of these issues. And their owners had sort of exhausted all the options. And my mom was like, let's give this a try. If you're really intuitive, you should be able to read animals. And so my first test was being put in the stall when I was probably like 12, with a horse that was notoriously biting and kicking everyone. And my mom was like a very tough person. So she was like, figure it out. And so I had to do my meditation outside of the stall, and I was trying to connect telepathically with the horse to just, let him know that I was there to help, and I wasn't gonna, try to make him do anything. I just want to know like why he was so grouchy. Well, like what's going on? Maybe I can help you. And because I was 12, I really wasn't second guessing myself at all. Like Paulina was saying, like you just have to be confident. They teach you this confidence. You just believe in yourself. And so I went in there and I put my hands on the horse. I asked if that was okay. And immediately I had this flood of information from this horse that was biting everyone in the face. Like no one could deal with this horse. And
If
he was
I'm
like,
correct, it's Bitey McKickerston.
that was the nickname I gave him because I was so scared of Bitey McKickerson. And I was like, I'm going to get kicked to death. And But, he really actually just wanted to complain to me. And so he was like, I do not like the music. It's too loud. And he kind of like, I looked up and there was a little radio in his stall. He's like, I don't like the style of music. And I kind of like heard classical music in my head. And I was like, oh, he likes classical better. Someone must have played that once. And he's like, also, they sing in the morning. I don't like the horse next to me. He just like had this long list.
Grumpy old man. Grumpy old
Yeah.
man.
And so when I left the stall and I told his owner everything and I told the barn hands everything, they were like, I mean, we'll try it. And then he was fine. No biting, no kicking, perfect little gentleman going in and out of his stall. And so then I had all this business at the barn and I got a lot of practice.
I love that. As an animal lover, I love that. Now, Paulina, you learned a lot as a child in your family, from your family as well. But you had this time where that wasn't the right life for you and you had to, kind of leave that. And what was it like reclaiming that? It has to be very difficult to, to leave it behind and then to also kind of come back to it. Can you tell us-
Re-embrace it.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah. I will say that I think growing up, I have to backtrack a little bit because ethics they were taught, but it was more like you don't take food out of other people's mouths and kind of like stuff like that. It wasn't as like basically the line definitely blurred. And so I would say that that was one reason, but also, I mean, I was in a place where it's all I was allowed to do. And so I felt like this, I'm going to get a corporate job and I'm going to like, live the American life. And like, I want a 9 to 5. I'm going to take the weekends off because I was working late. I was working all the way 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Like the fortune telling world is an entertainment industry for sure. And so yeah, I did the 9 to 5 and I was just like, I don't know, like I needed spirituality and I learned so much about my people, learned so much about my culture. There was just so much more that I came back with. Like when I did come back to it, I'd also went to college and I studied biotech and I was like, I don't know why, but like so deep into the scientific realm, it intercrosses with the spiritual realm.
It
So
does.
now, yeah, like totally. Like once you reach one side of the spectrum, like you're on the other side of the spectrum at that point.
Yeah.
Like nothing exists and everything exists.
So you really went out the science route. You went completely opposite your upbringing, and then that brought you, just like science and magic, it brought you right back.
Totally. It brought me right back. And I do find my experience, I think, has totally helped me throughout the whole process. So I feel more confident. Like I can also write emails and be a fortune teller or something.
One of the other things I loved throughout this book was you guys talked a lot about your family. You talked about your ancestors and you talked about doing a little ancestor work and also dreams, which to me, a lot of times it seems to me that when I hear that people who don't necessarily believe that their ancestors come back to them, they will say, my loved one passed away and they came to me in a dream. You hear that so often.
Very common.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about dream work and a little bit about ancestors coming to dreams?
Yeah, I mean, I think Romani people in general, there's always diversity in our group, but a lot of Roma believe that dreams are really significant. It's something you should pay attention to, that spirit guides, ancestors can all speak to you, your own intuition, deity, spirit. And so we do pay close attention to our dreams and talk about the symbols that come up. And in both Paulina's and my family, animals tend to indicate some sort of premonition or indication for the future or for your fortune. And for some Romani people, you can have visits with your ancestors that are kind of like neutral, loving. Maybe they're giving a message. Other times, we believe that they are like coming to bring us to the other side. And so it can depend if you feel like that's a signal that it's time to go, or if it's just an ancestor visiting. It's interesting because one of my auntie Zina, who I just absolutely adored, and most of my Romani family passed away over the last couple of years, like one after the other, very quickly.
Oh, geez.
And
That's hard.
yeah, it was really hard. And my auntie was always the kind of person who, if I was having a bad time at school, she would just kind of come pick me up and be like, we're going to the beach. And I'd be like, okay, bye. So she was definitely like, oh, you don't like it? Let's bail. And I was having a really, really bad day one day. And I said to her out loud, I was like, oh, Auntie, I can't take it anymore. And that night, I had this dream that I was going to the darkest like region of the world, and I was getting all these like messages from my friends to not eat the food and to wear a code because I would die if I ate the food, all this stuff. And I ended up at like this nightclub because my auntie loved to dance. And she was ushering me in, and she was like, come in, eat with me, dance with me. And I was like, oh, I can't eat or I'll die. And she's like, eat with me. And I was like, oh no, she heard me. She heard me say, I'm tired of this. She's coming to get me. And my dog actually jumped on my chest and barked in my face and was like, wake up. And I was like, oh, and I had to have a little chat. I was like, Auntie, I am not ready. I am just dramatic. You don't have
Not
to
yet,
come get
Auntie.
me.
Thank you.
Love you, but not right now.
Yeah. So yeah, it varies. I think sometimes people can read really heavy into dreams, and even if it is a spirit coming to get you, you can often negotiate or talk.
Do you have anything that you recommend to, if you wanted to reach out to someone in your dreams, or if you wanted to reach out to an ancestor? Paulina, do you have a preferred way that you like to do that? Like how you like to approach your ancestors?
I think what's so crazy is I find the similarities because it always comes down to food, some way, shape, or form. Like it always comes down to food. So like you put out their most favorite things, you light them a cigarette, you just kind of like their coffee is really important. Coffee for some reason is super important. Water, and yeah, their favorite things, and you just that kind of like calls their spirit. And then you can technically do a little ceremony if you wanted to with some frankincense and bread, where you light a candle and you light the frankincense, and you just kind of take it around the table and say some things, and it like calls your ancestors or your spirits to you. So yeah.
I love that. And I love how you brought up the similarities because, we were just talking about, the Celtic celebration of Samhain is coming up, and they very often do like a silent supper, and food is a big part of that, to call their beloved dead and to have that. And I just love seeing that across different cultures, seeing all those different similarities, because our ancestors, our spirits are the same the world over, and they all like the same kinds of things. So I think that's very cool. Now you also mentioned, leaving out maybe a cigarette for your beloved dead. And I noticed one of the things, you guys have recipes and good spells in your book. You also have tea recipes, which Chelle and I love, and smokable recipes as well, which we are both very much into. So I do like mixing a tea blend to do work, or even mixing a smokable blend to do spell work. Can you guys tell us your experiences with herbs?
I think that, for both Paulina and I, we grew up just learning about herbs and spices in medicinal ways. And the magic of it was always just very practical. Like, the things that were considered lucky are also really healthy for you, like, hot pepper and garlic and, lemon and all of these things. And so we came up with some recipes that were just with herbs that we're familiar with. Paulina's family is super into lavender, and so a lot of her recipes are really lavender heavy. Mine is really into like the chamomile and the lemon, and my grandma was always interested in kind of like, so I run pretty anxious. Actually, Paulina does too. We're both very anxious.
So lavender and chamomile is perfect.
Yes. A lot of our recipes are about like bringing the energy nice and calm and smoothed out. And so, yeah, we just shared some of our favorite recipes, things that we've tinkered with. And we have some really simple ones. We have some more complex ones. And both Paulina and I really like to integrate, smoking and smoke into our personal rituals. So we thought that would be fun to just introduce some of our favorites.
I was pleasantly surprised to see that. I did not expect to see any recipes like that here, but I was very happy to see those, because I think herbs and incorporating them in teas and smokables is a wonderful way to bring them into your practice. So I was very happy to see that in your book.
Yeah. And I think that, we have such an animistic perspective that it's important to remember that we can talk to the plants and ask for their help.
It looks like there is a very strong animistic perspective in the Romani beliefs. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we really feel that everything has a spirit, and again, we can't really speak for all Roma, but Paulina and I grew up this way, and I think it's sort of the old way of doing things, but people might have converted to different religions, have different perspectives.
Absolutely.
But yeah, we were, both really raised with this idea of being respectful of all living things, of plants, and even inanimate objects. Like, a lot of Roma will apologize to bread if they drop it on the floor because bread is so important to us.
Mhm.
And so it was just a way to move through the world with respect, but also to remember how connected we are to all life. And our relationship to the land, especially being historically nomadic, is much more of a relationship rather than ownership. And so I think that really permeates everything that we do.
Love
And
that.
again, that's something that definitely translates to multiple cultures,
Hmm.
multiple societies. And I think that is one of the things that I learned the most from this book is that, everybody's kind of really just doing the same thing. They're just tweaking it a little bit different, depending on region, culture, upbringing, and things of that nature. We're all doing the same thing here.
Now, do you have a favorite form of divination, Paulina? Is there something that you prefer to do?
Definitely. Again, like I think I might have said this before, but like I hate saying this because it feels like it's so overplayed, like in and over marketed or something in society. But I think tarot is just really easy for me.
I agree 100%.
Yeah, like I could do a lot of other things, but it's just like it's fun, I like looking at the pictures. I like all the different cards and the pretty colors and all the different artwork, and it's kind of a favorite. I grew up with it and I feel like it holds like there's deep roots and deep history in there. And I think that's what I connect to.
Paulina, I have a side question. You talked about having a lot of decks. Now, one thing I need to share is I am a tarot deck collector, and
Addict. She's a tarot deck
shush,
addict.
shush yourself. And I have about 200 decks right now. Are you a fanatic, and what is your favorite deck? Because I don't even use them all. Honestly, I use two or three, but it's the pictures I just love tarot. So are you a fanatic, A? And B, what is your absolute favorite deck to use?
Gosh, I feel like my real answer is going to disappoint you a little bit, but I would say that, so basically, I would say that I love the Rider-Waite deck just because it's what I grew up with. And so I know, like, once you learn the Rider-Waite, you can learn everything else. So I always find myself going back to Rider-Waite, but I really feel like I could pick up any deck and just kind of use it like right in that moment. But I mean, I don't even know all the correlations to like a regular playing deck. But for some reason, I went to a party and I gave great readings all night with a regular playing card of deck, and I made some side cash. Like I think
Nice.
you just kind of learn it. But I love that you're a collector. My mom totally collected, and I'm sure she'd probably have a better answer for you. But for me, I feel like it's just any deck and the traditional probably Rider-Waite just because it's always there.
I did the opposite. I absolutely refused to touch a Rider-Waite deck for 30 years until like what, Layla, 2 years ago
Few
or a
years
year and a half
ago.
ago.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
now that's the deck I
Her
use.
favorite.
Yeah, but I never touched it until recently.
Yeah. It's your favorite now?
I'm using it right now. I
Oh
will
yeah.
always go back to the Witch's Tarot that was put out in the early to mid 90s. That is my all-time favorite. But currently I am using the Rider-Waite Smith deck.
Okay,
And I
I love
love it.
that. We're actually hoping, I mean, not hoping, but we're working on our own tarot deck right now.
Ooh, very
Yeah.
nice. That's
You will definitely
exciting.
have to let us know because I will need to obtain
She'll
a
have to
copy
add
of
it to
that
her
for my collection.
collection.
Yes. Yes.
Aw.
For sure.
Jezmina, same question for you. Do you have a favorite form of divination?
It really varies on who I'm reading for and why. Like, I definitely feel like they all have their specialties. Tarot is so good for what's happening right now. The palm is so big, it's so good for the big picture and your personality. But I have a special place in my heart for tea leaf reading just because I love the ritual of it and I love how personalized the symbols can be. And I just have such good memories of reading for my family. That was everyone's favorite in my family. So that was when everyone got together and read for each other and we got to gossip and it was the most fun.
I love that. I love
Time.
that.
Yeah, we are on book tour actually throughout October, all the way culminating to a huge festival that we're putting on in New Orleans called the
Love.
Welcome to Romanistan Festival. And we're doing workshops on tarot, tea leaf reading, palmistry. And so definitely check
Ooh.
out romanistanpodcast.com for our whole tour schedule. And there are different ways to support the festival too if you want to get
You have a
involved. So like corporate
Patreon, right?
sponsorships.
Tell us,
Yeah, we have a
tell people how to find you and how they can support you guys.
And give us the name of the podcast so the listeners can go check you out.
Yeah, so we are Romanistan Podcast. It's Romanistan. And our website, Romanistan Podcast, really has all the best ways to support us. Right now, we're doing a fundraiser for our book tour and for the festival that we're planning. And you can listen to us on any podcast platform. We have a very active social media on Romanistan Podcasts on Instagram. And so those are really the best ways to find us and support us. And we also have a coffee fundraiser, which is a little more active than our Patreon at the moment, but you can also be a Patreon subscriber if you want to.
Nice. And I'll put links to all of that in the show notes. But we would like to thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us.
We will definitely put links to everything in the show notes and make sure that people can find your fabulous book, Secrets of Romani Fortune-Telling, Divining with Tarot, Palmistry, Tea Leaves, and more. Chelle and I give it 5 brooms up. We both love it. Has
Thank
so
you.
much in there. Thank you.
And we are hoping to see you when your book tour hits my town,
Salem, Mass.
October 18th. So any listeners that are going to be in Salem in mid-October, these lovely ladies will be in Salem promoting their book October 18th. And again, Jezmina, can you tell us when you're in Salem? We're just going to talk about this one in particular because that's where I'm at. When you're in Salem, where can we find you again?
So actually, we have 2 dates. And so one is technically y'all know the shop House Witch. They have a clubhouse in Peabody. Mm-hmm. And so we will be there on the 16th. And we'll be doing just a book talk and signing and everything. And then on the 18th at Chagall Pack in Salem, Massachusetts, we're doing a spirit communication and tarot workshop. And it's going to be so much fun. We have all the details on our website. There'll be evening workshops and we'll have live music with our Romanistan musician, Victor, who does beautiful flamenco fusion music.
We can't wait.
Chelle.
Yes.
Is your couch free that weekend?
My couch is free. And you are going to be here,
yes!
And we are going to be going into this.
Yes,
so we absolutely cannot wait to meet you ladies in person because we are definitely going to come running up to you and girl fan you. So
we cannot wait to hang out with you in person. That'll be so much fun.
Thank you.
Hopefully we will see you very soon.
Thank
you guys again so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Y'all are a delight.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you again to Paulina and Jezmina for joining us on our Solarium episode. We really appreciate your time, and I had so much fun with them. They're amazing.
And guys, seriously, Secrets of Romani Fortune-Telling, excellent book, 5 rooms. You really need to check it out.
And so thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you listening to our show. Check out our website, our Facebook, our Instagram, Back on the Broomstick. And we will see you on Friday. Stay wise, stay wicked.
And for the love of all things holy, keep it witchy.